I never thought I'd lose everything in a single afternoon. But when I saw my brother and his wife loading the last of my furniture into their truck, I realized some betrayals don't come from strangers. They come from the people who share your blood. And as they drove toward my gate, smiling like they'd just won the lottery, they had no idea what was waiting for them at the end of my driveway. No idea at all. My name is Catherine Moore, and I'm about to tell you how I lost everything I owned in 2 hours flat, and how I got it all back in the most unexpected way possible. But before I get to the part where my brother's face went white as a sheet, before I show you how karma showed up in a form nobody could have predicted, I need to take you back to where this nightmare began. Because revenge isn't just about the ending. It's about understanding why someone would go this far. Why someone would burn every bridge just to watch the ashes scatter. It started on a Tuesday morning in late September. I remember because the leaves were just beginning to turn, and I'd spent the entire previous weekend raking them into neat piles in my front yard. The house was mine, fully paid off, left to me by my grandmother 3 years earlier when she passed. It wasn't a mansion, but it was beautiful. A 2-story colonial with blue shutters, a wraparound porch, and enough land that I could see the sunset without any buildings blocking the view. My grandmother had loved that house. She'd raised my father there. And when she left it to me in her will, she wrote a letter that I kept in my nightstand drawer. It said, "Catherine, this house holds 100 years of memories. Protect it. Love it. And never let anyone make you believe you don't deserve it." I read that letter every time I felt alone. Every time I doubted myself. Because my grandmother knew something I'd spent most of my life trying to ignore. She knew my family didn't see me the way she did. To her, I was special. I was worthy. But to my brother Marcus and the rest of them, I was just the scroop. The black sheep. The one who didn't finish college, who worked as a freelance graphic designer instead of getting a real job, who never married, never had kids, never followed the script they'd written for me. Marcus, on the other hand, was the golden child. 3 years older than me, Ivy League educated, married to a woman named Vanessa who came from money and made sure everyone knew it. They lived in a sleek downtown condo, drove matching luxury cars, and posted photos of their perfect life on social media like they were running for office. But beneath all that polish, there was something rotten. I just didn't see it yet. Or maybe I didn't want to. When Grandma died, Marcus was furious that she'd left the house to me. He'd assumed it would go to him as the eldest, as the responsible one. At the funeral, he'd pulled me aside, his jaw tight, his eyes cold. "You know you can't afford to keep that place," he'd said. "The property taxes alone will bury you. Just sell it to me now and save yourself the trouble." I'd looked at him, at the way he said it like it was already decided, and I'd told him no. Told him the house was mine and I wasn't selling. He'd smiled then, a thin, bitter smile, and walked away without another word. That was 3 years ago. I thought he'd let it go. I thought he'd moved on. I was wrong. That Tuesday morning, I was in my home office working on a logo design for a local bakery when I heard a truck pull into my driveway. I glanced out the window and saw Marcus and Vanessa stepping out of a rented moving truck, the kind you get from a hardware store for $60 a day. My stomach dropped. They hadn't called. Hadn't texted. Just showed up. I went downstairs and opened the front door, trying to keep my voice steady. "Marcus, what are you doing here?" He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Hey, Cat. We need to talk." Vanessa stood beside him, her arms crossed, her expression unreadable. She was wearing designer sunglasses even though it was overcast, and her blonde hair was pulled back in a tight ponytail that made her face look sharp, angular. "Can we come in?" she asked, though it didn't sound like a question. I hesitated, every instinct screaming at me that something was wrong. But he was my brother. So I stepped aside and let them in. We sat in the living room, the same room where my grandmother used to serve tea on Sunday afternoons, where I'd spent countless evenings reading by the fireplace. Marcus looked around like he was appraising the place, taking inventory. "Nice," he said. "You've kept it up." "Thanks," I said carefully. "Why are you here?" He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, hands clasped. "I'm going to be direct with you, Cat. Vanessa and I are in a tough spot financially. We made some investments that didn't pan out, and we need to liquidate some assets. I remembered that Grandma left you this house, and I thought maybe we could work something out. Work something out? I repeated. We need to borrow against the house, Vanessa cut in, her voice clipped. Just temporarily. We'll pay you back with interest. But we need to move fast. I stared at them. You want me to put my house up as collateral for your debts? It's not like that, Marcus said quickly. We're family. We help each other out. You'd be doing us a huge favor, and like Vanessa said, we'll make it worth your while. No, I said. The word came out harder than I intended, but I didn't take it back. Vanessa's mouth tightened. Excuse me? I said no. This house isn't a bargaining chip. It's my home. If you're in financial trouble, I'm sorry, but I can't help you like that. Marcus's expression shifted, something dark flickering across his face. Can't, or won't? Both, I said. He stood up abruptly, and Vanessa followed. Fine, he said. I should have known you'd be selfish about this. You've always been selfish. The accusation stung, but I held my ground. You need to leave. We're going, Vanessa said coldly. But don't come crying to us when you need help. Because trust me, Catherine, you will. They walked out, and I watched from the window as they climbed back into the truck and drove away. My hands were shaking. I told myself it was over, that they'd tried and failed and now they'd leave me alone. But 2 days later, everything fell apart. I was at the grocery store when I got the call from my neighbor, Mrs. Patel, an elderly woman who lived across the street. Catherine, she said, her voice anxious, there's a moving truck at your house. And people are carrying your furniture out. My blood turned to ice. What? I thought maybe you were moving and forgot to tell me, but then I saw it was your brother, and something about it didn't feel right. I didn't wait for her to finish. I dropped my basket in the middle of the aisle and ran to my car, my heart hammering so hard I thought it might break through my ribs. The store was only 10 minutes from my house, but it felt like an eternity. I kept replaying Mrs. Patel's words. Your brother. Carrying your furniture out. It didn't make sense. How did he even get inside? When I turned onto my street, I saw the truck parked in my driveway, its back door open. And then I saw Marcus and Vanessa walking out of my house carrying my grandmother's antique dining table. The one she'd bought in Paris in the 1960s. The one I'd eaten breakfast at every single morning for the last 3 years. I slammed on the brakes and jumped out of the car, running toward them. What the hell are you doing? Marcus barely glanced at me. Loading up what's ours. Ours? That's my table. Vanessa smirked. Not anymore. I tried to grab the other end of the table, but Marcus yanked it away. Don't make this harder than it needs to be, Kat. How did you even get in my house? I demanded. He pulled a key from his pocket and dangled it in front of me. Grandma gave me a spare years ago. Guess she trusted me more than you thought. My vision blurred with tears, with rage. You can't do this. This is theft. I'm calling the police. Go ahead, Vanessa said, her voice dripping with disdain. By the time they get here, we'll be long gone. And good luck proving anything. It's his word against yours. I pulled out my phone, my fingers fumbling as I dialed 911. But before I could hit call, Marcus was in front of me, his hand clamping down on my wrist. Don't, he said quietly. You'll regret it. There was something in his eyes, something that made my blood run cold. This wasn't the brother I grew up with. This was a stranger. A desperate, dangerous stranger. He let go of my wrist and went back to the truck. I stood there, frozen, as they made trip after trip. My couch. My grandmother's rocking chair. The paintings she'd collected over decades. My television. My kitchen appliances. Even the lamps. They stripped my house bare, room by room, like locusts devouring a field. And I couldn't stop them. I tried. I screamed at them. I stood in their way. But Marcus just pushed past me, and Vanessa laughed, actually laughed, as she carried out a box of my books. Mrs. Patel came over, her face pale. Should I call someone? I already did, I lied. I didn't want her involved. Didn't want her to get hurt. By the time they were done, my house was almost empty. They'd left my bed, probably because it wouldn't fit in the truck. They'd left the kitchen table, a cheap IKEA thing I'd bought when I first moved in. But everything else, everything that mattered, was gone. Marcus climbed into the driver's seat, Vanessa beside him. He looked at me through the windshield, and for a moment, I thought I saw regret. But then he started the engine, and I knew I was wrong. They pulled out of the driveway, heading toward the gate at the end of my property. The gate my grandmother had installed decades ago, a heavy iron thing with ornate scrollwork and a manual lock. I always left it open because I never expected to need it. But as I watched them drive toward it, something inside me snapped. I'd spent the last 2 hours feeling helpless. Feeling like a victim. But I wasn't going to let them leave with my life in the back of that truck. Not without a fight. I sprinted toward the gate, faster than I'd ever run before. My lungs burned. My legs screamed. But I didn't stop. I reached the gate just as their truck was 20 feet away, and I threw my full weight against it, swinging it shut. The old hinges groaned, but it moved. I fumbled with the lock, my hands shaking so badly I almost dropped it. But I managed to snap it into place just as the truck reached the gate. Marcus slammed on the brakes. The truck skidded to a stop, tires screeching. And then, silence. I stood on the other side of the gate, breathing hard, staring at them through the iron bars. Marcus's face was red with fury. He threw open the door and stormed toward me. "Open the gate, Catherine." "No. Open the damn gate, or I swear to God, or what?" I shouted back. "You'll steal more of my things. You've already taken everything." Vanessa got out of the truck, her sunglasses pushed up on her head. "This is ridiculous. You can't keep us here. Watch me." Marcus grabbed the gate and shook it, but it didn't budge. "You're going to regret this." "I already do," I said. "I regret ever trusting you." He stared at me, his chest heaving. And then, something changed. His expression shifted from anger to something else. Something calculating. He pulled out his phone. "What are you doing?" I asked. He didn't answer. Just dialed a number and held the phone to his ear. "Yeah, hi. I need to report a trespassing situation. My sister has locked us on her property and won't let us leave. We're concerned for our safety." My stomach dropped. He was calling the police. On me. Within 20 minutes, 2 squad cars pulled up outside the gate. The officers got out, looking between Marcus and me with obvious confusion. One of them, a middle-aged man with a thick mustache, approached me. Can you open the gate?" "They stole everything from my house," I said, my voice breaking. "Everything. I was just trying to stop them." "She's lying," Vanessa called out. "We were helping her move some furniture she wanted to get rid of, and now she's having some kind of breakdown." The officer looked at me. "Is that true?" "No. They broke into my house and took my things without permission." "Do you have proof?" he asked. I opened my mouth, then closed it. Proof. I didn't have proof. I hadn't taken photos. Hadn't filmed anything. It had all happened so fast. "She gave us a key," Marcus said, holding it up. "We thought we were helping her out. And now she's holding us hostage." The officer sighed. I'm going to need you to open the gate. If you have a dispute about property, you'll need to settle it in civil court. But you can't keep them here against their will." "But they, open the gate." I felt like I was drowning. Like the world had tilted and I couldn't find my footing. With shaking hands, I unlocked the gate and pushed it open. Marcus smiled at me as he climbed back into the truck. "Thanks, sis." And then they drove away, my entire life packed in the back of that truck, while the police watched and did nothing. I stood there long after they were gone, staring at the empty driveway. Mrs. Patel came over and put her arm around me. "Come to my house," she said gently. "You shouldn't be alone right now." But I couldn't move. Couldn't think. All I could do was replay the last few hours over and over, searching for the moment where I could have stopped this. Where I could have fought harder. But there was no such moment. Because the people who were supposed to love me had decided I was disposable. And there was nothing I could do about it. Or so I thought. That night, I sat on my bedroom floor, the only room in the house that still looked lived in, and I cried until I had no tears left. And then, when the tears were gone, something else took their place. Something cold and sharp and focused. Rage. Not the hot, explosive kind. The quiet kind. The kind that plans. The kind that waits. I picked up my phone and started scrolling through my contacts. I wasn't a lawyer. Wasn't a cop. Wasn't someone with power or money or connections. But I was smart. And I was patient. And I knew my brother better than he thought I did. I knew his weaknesses. His secrets. The things he'd buried so deep he'd convinced himself they didn't exist. And I was going to dig them all up. The next morning, I woke up with a plan. It wasn't fully formed yet, just the skeleton of an idea, but it was enough to get me out of bed. Enough to make me feel like I wasn't completely powerless. I made a list, the way my grandmother used to when she had a problem to solve. Step by step. Methodical. Logical. Step 1. Document everything. I took photos of my empty house, room by room. The bare walls. The spaces where furniture used to be. The marks on the floor where my grandmother's piano had sat for 40 years. I wrote down everything I remembered them taking, every piece of furniture, every painting, every appliance. I went through old photos on my phone, looking for pictures of my house from before, anything that showed what used to be there. I emailed myself the list and the photos, then printed copies and put them in a folder. If this was going to court, I needed evidence. Step 2. Find out where they took my things. I called mutual friends, distant relatives, anyone who might have contact with Marcus and Vanessa. I didn't tell them what happened, just asked casually if they'd heard from my brother lately. Most people said no. But one cousin mentioned that Marcus had posted something on social media about exciting changes and downsizing. I pulled up his profile, and there it was. A photo of him and Vanessa standing in front of a storage unit, smiling like they'd just won the lottery. The caption read, "Sometimes you have to make hard choices to move forward. Grateful for family who understand." Family who understand. I wanted to throw my phone across the room. But the storage unit was a lead. I zoomed in on the photo, trying to make out any identifying details. In the background, I could see part of a sign. Riverside Self-Storage. I knew that place. It was 20 minutes away, on the east side of town. Step 3. Talk to a lawyer. I didn't have money for a big firm, but I found a legal aid clinic that offered free consultations. The lawyer I met with was a tired-looking woman in her 50s named Patricia. She listened to my story, nodding occasionally, her expression sympathetic but not hopeful. "Do you have any documentation that the items were yours?" she asked. I showed her my photos, my list. She studied them, then handed them back. "This helps, but it's not enough. Without receipts, without proof of purchase, it's going to be hard to prove ownership in court. Especially since he had a key to your house." "But he didn't have permission to take my things," I said. "I believe you. But legally, it's murky. He can argue that you gave him verbal permission, or that he believed the items were family property. It becomes a he said she said situation, and those are notoriously difficult to win. So there's nothing I can do." She hesitated. "You could file a police report for theft. But based on what you've told me, I don't think it'll go anywhere. The police will see it as a family dispute, and they'll tell you to handle it in civil court. And civil court is expensive and time-consuming. I'm sorry. I wish I had better news." I left the clinic feeling like I'd been punched in the gut. The system I'd trusted, the system that was supposed to protect people like me, had failed. And my brother knew it. He'd counted on it. That night, I sat on my empty living room floor and thought about giving up. Thought about just cutting my losses, selling the house, and moving on. But every time I closed my eyes, I saw my grandmother's face. I heard her voice. "Never let anyone make you believe you don't deserve it." I deserved justice. And if the system wouldn't give it to me, I'd find another way. Step 4. Dig deeper. I started researching Marcus and Vanessa, really researching them. I combed through their social media, looking for clues about their financial situation. And what I found was interesting. For people who claimed to be struggling, they were living pretty well. Fancy dinners. Weekend trips. A recent post about Vanessa getting a new handbag that cost more than most people's rent. Either they were lying about being broke, or they were spending money they didn't have. I kept digging. I found an article from 6 months earlier in a local business journal. Marcus's company, a financial consulting firm, had been investigated for possible securities fraud. Nothing had been proven, and the case had been dropped, but the article mentioned that several clients had filed complaints about mismanaged funds. I screenshot everything. Then I found something even more interesting. A comment on one of Vanessa's Instagram posts from a woman I didn't recognize. It said, "Love the new place. Can't wait to see it in person. You too deserve this after everything you've been through." New place. They just told me they were in financial trouble. Why would they be getting a new place? I clicked on Vanessa's profile and scrolled back. And there it was. A post from 3 days before they showed up at my house. A photo of her holding up a set of keys, beaming. The caption, "New beginnings. Can't wait to make this house a home." They'd bought a house. They weren't broke. They were furnishing a new house. With my furniture. The realization hit me like a freight train. This wasn't about desperation. This wasn't about needing help. They'd planned this. They'd lied to my face, then robbed me blind so they could decorate their new home without spending a dime. And they thought they'd gotten away with it. I sat there, staring at that photo, and something inside me hardened. If they wanted to play games, I'd play. But I'd play to win. Step 5. Find an ally. I needed help, but I couldn't go to the police. Couldn't afford a lawyer. So I went to the one person who might actually care. Mrs. Patel. I knocked on her door the next morning, and she answered with a warm smile. "Catherine, dear. Come in. I've been worried about you." We sat in her cozy living room, and I told her everything. The whole story, from beginning to end. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "What do you need from me?" "I need to get into that storage unit," I said. "I need to see if my things are there. And I need someone to come with me, in case things go wrong." She didn't hesitate. "I'll go." "Mrs. Patel, you don't have to. Your grandmother was my friend," she said firmly. "We had tea together every week for 20 years. She loved you more than anything in this world. If she were here, she'd be raising hell. So I'll do it for her." I almost cried. Instead, I hugged her. The next day, we drove to Riverside Self-Storage. It was a sprawling complex, rows and rows of identical orange doors. I had no idea which unit was Marcus's, but I had a plan. I walked into the office and smiled at the teenager behind the desk. "Hi, my brother rented a unit here recently, and I'm supposed to meet him, but he forgot to tell me the unit number." "Marcus Holloway?" The kid barely looked up from his phone. "Unit 117. Thanks." It was that easy. Mrs. Patel and I walked through the complex until we found Unit 117. The door was locked, of course, but there was a small gap at the bottom, just enough to see inside if you got down on your hands and knees. I crouched down and peered through. And there, in the dim light, I saw them. My grandmother's rocking chair. The paintings. The antique lamp. Everything. "It's all here," I whispered. "So what now?" Mrs. Patel asked. "Now I call the police. With this evidence, they'll have to take me seriously." But when I called, I got the same runaround. Storage units are private property. We can't just break into one without a warrant. And to get a warrant, you'll need to file a civil suit and prove ownership. We recommend you contact a lawyer." I hung up, my hands shaking with frustration. They'd covered their tracks too well. And the system wasn't going to help me. "There has to be another way," Mrs. Patel said. And that's when I remembered something. Something my grandmother told me years ago when I was dealing with a bully in high school. Sometimes, Catherine, you can't fight fire with fire. You have to be smarter. You have to let them think they've won, and then you pull the rug out from under them. I looked at Mrs. Patel. I have an idea. But it's risky. And it's probably illegal. She smiled. Good. Step 6, the sting. I spent the next week preparing. I bought a cheap security camera online and set it up outside the storage unit, hidden in a bush, angled at the door. If Marcus came to check on the unit, I'd know. I also started watching his social media obsessively, looking for any hint of when he'd be away from home. And then I got lucky. Vanessa posted about a weekend trip to the mountains. Much needed getaway, the caption read. They'd be gone for 3 days. I called a locksmith, told him I'd lost the key to my storage unit, and met him at Riverside. He opened Unit 117 without asking any questions, and I handed him cash. Thanks. My brother will be so relieved. As soon as he left, I backed my car up to the unit and started loading. Mrs. Patel helped, bless her, and we worked fast. My grandmother's furniture. The paintings. The appliances. Everything. It took us 4 hours, but we got it all. And when the unit was empty, I left a note on the floor. Thanks for keeping my things safe. Consider this your eviction notice. Love, Kat. We drove back to my house, and I spent the rest of the day putting everything back where it belonged. The rocking chair by the window. The paintings on the walls. The piano in the corner. It wasn't perfect, some things had been damaged, scratched, or dented, but it was mine again. My home was starting to feel like home. I waited for Marcus to call, to scream at me, to threaten me. But days passed, and I heard nothing. Which didn't make sense. He had to know by now that the unit was empty. Why wasn't he reacting? And then, 1 week later, I got my answer. A black sedan pulled into my driveway. 2 men in suits got out, followed by Marcus and Vanessa. My stomach dropped. Marcus looked smug, like he'd just won a game of chess. One of the men knocked on my door, and I answered, my heart pounding. Catherine Moore, he asked. Yes. I'm Detective Harris. This is Detective Grant. We need to ask you some questions about a theft. I felt the blood drain from my face. A theft. Marcus stepped forward. She broke into our storage unit and stole our property. We have proof. Of course. The security camera I'd set up had caught me. But it had also caught them. This was the moment I'd been planning for. Officers, I said calmly, I'd be happy to answer your questions. But first, can I show you something? I led them inside, into my living room, where everything was back in place. This is my furniture, I said. These are my grandmother's paintings. This is my property. Marcus and Vanessa stole it from my house 2 weeks ago, and I took it back. Detective Harris looked at Marcus. Is this true? She's lying, Marcus said quickly. We bought that furniture from her. She was downsizing. Do you have a receipt? Detective Grant asked. Marcus hesitated. It was a family deal. We didn't think we needed one. So you have no proof of ownership, I said. But I do. I handed them my folder. Photos. Receipts. The letter from my grandmother's will specifying that the house and its contents were mine. Emails and texts from before the robbery, showing me talking about my furniture, my home. Everything. The detectives studied the documents. Detective Harris looked at Marcus. Do you have any documentation that these items belong to you? Marcus's face turned red. She gave them to us. It was a verbal agreement. A verbal agreement that you can't prove, Detective Grant said. And that you executed by entering her home without her permission. I had a key, Marcus protested. That doesn't give you the right to take her property, Detective Harris said. He turned to me. Do you want to press charges? I looked at Marcus. At the panic in his eyes. At Vanessa, who'd gone pale. And I realized something. I didn't want them arrested. I wanted them to suffer the way I'd suffered. I wanted them to feel the humiliation, the helplessness, the betrayal. No, I said. I don't want to press charges. I just want them to leave me alone. Detective Harris nodded. Fair enough. Mr. Holloway, Ms. Holloway, I strongly suggest you don't contact your sister again. If she files a report, we'll have to investigate, and based on what I've seen here, it won't go well for you. They left without a word. And I stood in my living room, surrounded by my grandmother's things, and I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Peace. But the story doesn't end there. Because 3 days later, I got a call from Patricia, the legal aid lawyer. Catherine, I just heard something you need to know. Your brother's firm is under investigation again. Apparently, one of his clients filed a lawsuit alleging embezzlement. It's all over the news. I pulled up the article. And there it was. Marcus's face on the front page, looking haggard. The headline, Local Financial Consultant Accused of Stealing Client Funds. The article detailed how he'd been mismanaging accounts, using client money to fund his lifestyle. The new house. The cars. The trips. All bought with stolen money. And now it was all coming crashing down. I should have felt vindicated. Should have felt like justice was served. But mostly, I just felt sad. Sad that my brother had become this person. Sad that greed and desperation had turned him into someone I didn't recognize. A week later, Vanessa filed for divorce. The house they'd bought was foreclosed on. Marcus lost his license, his business, everything. He called me once, late at night, his voice slurred with alcohol. I'm sorry, Kat. I didn't mean for it to get this bad. I didn't respond. Just hung up. Because sorry doesn't fix broken trust. Sorry doesn't undo betrayal. But here's the thing. As much as I wanted to hate him, as much as I wanted to celebrate his downfall, I couldn't. Because at the end of the day, he was still my brother. And that was the worst part. Not that he'd stolen from me, but that he'd destroyed our relationship for things. For furniture and paintings and appliances. For stuff. I never spoke to him again. Never saw Vanessa again. They moved away, to another state, trying to rebuild their lives somewhere no one knew their names. And I stayed in my grandmother's house, surrounded by the things she'd loved, the things she'd trusted me to protect. Sometimes, late at night, I sit in her rocking chair and think about that day. The day they drove away with my life in the back of a truck. The day I stood at that gate and decided I wouldn't be a victim. And I wonder if I did the right thing. If revenge was worth it. If getting my things back was worth losing my brother. And then I remember my grandmother's letter. Never let anyone make you believe you don't deserve it. I deserved better than what Marcus gave me. And I fought for it. Not with violence. Not with cruelty. But with patience, with strategy, with the knowledge that sometimes the best revenge isn't hurting someone. It's simply refusing to let them win. A year later, I was sitting on my porch, watching the sunset, when Mrs. Patel came over with a pot of tea. We sat together in comfortable silence, and then she said, "You know, your grandmother would be proud of you." "You think so?" I asked. "I know so. She always said you were stronger than you thought." "I think you proved her right." I smiled. "I had help. We all need help sometimes," she said. "That's what family is for. Real family. Not the kind that shares your blood, but the kind that shows up when you need them most." And as I sat there, sipping tea with the woman who'd become more of a family to me than my own brother ever was, I realized something. Marcus hadn't just stolen my furniture. He'd stolen something far more valuable. He'd stolen the idea that family was sacred, that blood meant loyalty, that the people you grew up with would always have your back. But in losing that, I'd gained something else. I'd gained the knowledge that family isn't about who you're born to. It's about who stands beside you when everything falls apart. And Mrs. Patel, this 72-year-old woman I barely knew a year ago, had shown me more loyalty and love than my brother ever had. So maybe, in the end, Marcus did me a favor. He showed me who he really was. And he showed me who I really was too. Someone who wouldn't back down. Someone who'd fight for what was right, even when the odds were stacked against her. Someone my grandmother could be proud of. The house still stands, blue shutters and all. I still work as a graphic designer, still eat breakfast at my grandmother's antique table, still read by the fireplace on cold nights. And sometimes, When I'm sitting in that rocking chair, I can almost feel her there. Almost hear her voice. You did good, Catherine. You protected what mattered. And you never let them make you believe you didn't deserve it. And that, more than anything, is what I hold on to. Not the furniture. Not the paintings. But the knowledge that I stood up for myself. That I didn't let them break me. That I survived, and came out stronger on the other side. As for Marcus, I heard through a mutual acquaintance that he's working at a car dealership now, trying to rebuild his life. Part of me hopes he finds peace. Part of me hopes he thinks about what he did, about what he lost, and learns from it. But mostly, I just hope he leaves me alone. Because I've moved on. I've built a life that doesn't include him, doesn't need him. And I'm happier for it. There's a saying my grandmother used to tell me, the best revenge is living well. And she was right. I could have destroyed Marcus. Could have gone to the press, could have made sure everyone knew what he'd done. But I didn't. Because that would have meant letting him live rent-free in my head for the rest of my life. And he wasn't worth it. Instead, I chose to live. To thrive. To fill my home with new memories, new friendships, new joys. I started hosting dinners for my neighbors, the way my grandmother used to. I took up painting, something I'd always wanted to try but never had the courage. I adopted a dog, a scruffy terrier mix from the shelter who sleeps at the foot of my bed and greets me every morning like I'm the most important person in the world. And you know what? I am happy. Genuinely, deeply happy. Not because I got revenge, though that moment when Marcus realized he'd been caught will always bring a small smile to my face. But because I learned something about myself that I didn't know before. I learned that I'm resilient. That I'm capable. That I don't need anyone's approval or validation to know my worth. The months that followed were quiet. Peaceful. I threw myself into my work, taking on bigger clients, more ambitious projects. I started making more money than I ever had before, enough that I could finally afford to do some renovations on the house. I fixed the roof, replaced the old windows, repainted the shutters that same brilliant blue my grandmother had loved. Every improvement felt like an act of love, a way of honoring her memory and the gift she'd given me. Mrs. Patel and I became inseparable. She taught me how to make her famous chicken curry, and I taught her how to use Photoshop. We had a standing Sunday brunch date, alternating between her house and mine. She told me stories about my grandmother, things I'd never known. About how my grandmother had been a quiet rebel in her youth, how she defied her own family to marry the man she loved, how she'd always believed in following your heart even when everyone else thought you were crazy. She saw that same spirit in you, Mrs. Patel told me one afternoon. That's why she left you the house. She knew you'd protect it. Not just the building, but what it represents. Independence. Strength. The courage to stand alone if you have to. I thought about that a lot. About how my grandmother had spent her whole life being underestimated, overlooked, dismissed. And how she'd responded by building a life that was entirely her own, on her own terms. The house wasn't just a house. It was a statement. A middle finger to everyone who'd ever told her she couldn't, or shouldn't, or wasn't enough. And now it was mine. My statement. My middle finger. 6 months after the storage unit incident, I was in the grocery store when I saw her. Vanessa. She looked different. Thinner. Her hair was darker, pulled back in a simple ponytail instead of her usual styled perfection. She was wearing jeans and a plain sweater, no designer labels in sight. She saw me at the same moment I saw her, and for a second, we just stared at each other across the produce section. I could have turned away. Could have pretended I hadn't seen her. But something made me walk over. Vanessa, I said. She tensed, like she was expecting me to attack her. Catherine. We stood there in awkward silence. Finally, she said, I know you probably don't want to hear this, but I'm sorry. For everything. What we did was inexcusable. I studied her face, looking for signs of manipulation, of insincerity. But all I saw was exhaustion. Defeat. Why did you do it? I asked. She looked down at her cart, filled with generic brands and sale items. Because Marcus told me it was the only way. We really were in trouble, financially. He'd made some bad investments, and we were drowning. He said you didn't deserve the house, that it should have been his, that it was only fair we took what was rightfully ours. And I believed him. I wanted to believe him, because the alternative was admitting that we'd failed, that we'd screwed up, that we were the problem. So you blamed me instead, I said. Yes. She met my eyes. And I was wrong. I know that now. For what it's worth, I'm trying to be a better person. I got a job, a real job. I'm in therapy. I'm working on myself. I know it doesn't fix what we did, but it's something. I nodded slowly. What about Marcus? We're divorced, she said. His, not doing well. The investigation, the lawsuit, losing everything, it broke him. Last I heard, he was living with our parents, trying to figure out what to do next. He talks about you sometimes. About how he wishes he could take it back. But he can't, I said. No. He can't. We stood there for another moment, and then Vanessa said, I don't expect you to forgive me. I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry. And that you were right. About everything. She walked away before I could respond, disappearing into the frozen food aisle. I stood there, staring after her, feeling something I didn't expect. Not satisfaction. Not vindication. Just sadness. For her. For Marcus. For the people they could have been if they'd made different choices. But also relief. Because their story was no longer my story. Their problems were no longer my problems. I'd drawn a line, and I was on the other side of it now, in a place where their choices couldn't hurt me anymore. That night, I sat down and wrote a letter. Not to Marcus. Not to Vanessa. But to myself. To the person I'd been a year ago, standing in her empty house, feeling like the world had ended. I wrote, Dear Catherine, right now, everything feels impossible. You feel powerless and betrayed and alone. But I'm writing to tell you that you survive this. More than survive. You come out the other side stronger, braver, more certain of who you are and what you deserve. The people who hurt you will face consequences, though maybe not the ones you expect. And you'll realize that the best revenge isn't making them suffer. It's building a life so full and rich and meaningful that they become irrelevant. So hold on. Keep fighting. Trust yourself. You're going to be okay. Better than okay. Love, future Catherine. I folded the letter and tucked it into my grandmother's old jewelry box, next to her wedding ring and the pearls she'd worn every Sunday. Someday, maybe, I'd pass it on to someone who needed to hear it. Someone who felt as lost as I once had. The year anniversary of the robbery came and went. I marked it by throwing a party, a celebration of survival. I invited all my neighbors, the friends I'd made in the past year, even the lawyer Patricia who'd tried to help me. We ate and drank and laughed on my front lawn, under string lights I'd hung from the trees. Mrs. Patel made her famous curry. I made my grandmother's lemon cake from her handwritten recipe. And as I looked around at all these people, this chosen family I'd built from scratch, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Gratitude. Not for the betrayal. Not for the pain. But for what it had taught me. That I was stronger than I knew. That family is what you make it. That home isn't just a place, it's a feeling. And I'd created that feeling here, in this house, with these people, in this life I'd fought so hard to protect. Late that night, after everyone had gone home, I sat on my porch with my dog curled at my feet and looked up at the stars. The same stars my grandmother had looked at from this exact spot for decades. And I felt her presence, as real as if she were sitting beside me. I did it, Grandma, I whispered. I protected the house. I protected myself. And I didn't let them win. The wind rustled through the trees, and I could have sworn I heard her voice. I knew you would, sweetheart. I always knew. The next morning, I woke up to an email. It was from a gallery owner in the city, someone who'd seen the paintings I'd been working on. I'd been posting them on social media as a way to document my healing journey. She wanted to feature my work in an upcoming show about resilience and transformation. The theme was rising from the ashes. I laughed. It was perfect. Too perfect. I spent the next month preparing for the show, painting late into the night, pouring every emotion from the past year onto canvas. Anger, grief, hope, joy. Each piece told part of my story, though I didn't make it obvious. I wanted people to bring their own interpretations, their own experiences to the work. The opening night was surreal. Dozens of people showed up, wandering through the gallery, studying my paintings, asking questions. Several pieces sold within the first hour. A journalist from the local paper asked to interview me about my work, about the inspiration behind it. It's about reclaiming your power, I told her. About what happens when you refuse to be a victim. When you decide that your story isn't over just because someone tried to write the ending for you. She scribbled notes, nodding. That's powerful. What would you say to someone who's going through something similar? Someone who feels like they've lost everything? I thought about it. I'd say that rock bottom has a way of showing you who you really are. And sometimes, you have to lose everything to realize what really matters. It's not the things. It's not the stuff. It's your sense of self. Your dignity. Your ability to look in the mirror and like the person staring back at you. That's what you fight for. That's what you protect. The article came out the following week, with a photo of me standing in front of my largest painting, a phoenix rising from flames, its wings spread wide, fierce and beautiful. The headline read, "Local artist turns personal tragedy into triumph." It was a bit melodramatic, but it brought in more clients, more opportunities. My graphic design business exploded. Galleries started reaching out. I was invited to speak at a conference about entrepreneurship and resilience. My life, the one Marcus had tried to destroy, was flourishing in ways I'd never imagined. And then, almost exactly 18 months after the robbery, I got a letter in the mail. The return address was from a minimum security prison 3 states away. My hands shook as I opened it. "Dear Catherine," it read, in Marcus's familiar handwriting. "I don't know if you'll read this. I wouldn't blame you if you threw it away without opening it. But I need to try. I need you to know that I'm sorry. Not the fake sorry I said before, when I was trying to save my own skin. I mean really, truly sorry. I destroyed our relationship over greed and pride and stupidity. I took advantage of your trust, your kindness, your love. And I have to live with that for the rest of my life. I'm in prison now. They convicted me on 3 counts of embezzlement. I'll be here for the next 5 years, minimum. And honestly, I deserve it. I deserve worse. Every day, I think about what I did to you. About the look on your face when we drove away with your things. About how you must have felt, betrayed by your own brother. And I hate myself for it. I'm not writing to ask for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I'm just writing to tell you that I'm sorry. And that I'm trying to be better. I'm in therapy. I'm taking classes. I'm working through my issues, my entitlement, my toxic relationship with money and success. I'm trying to become someone you wouldn't be ashamed to call your brother. Even if you never want to see me again, I hope you're doing well. I hope you're happy. You deserve happiness, Kat. You always did. Love, Marcus. I read the letter 3 times. Then I folded it carefully and put it in a drawer. I didn't respond. Not right away. Maybe not ever. Because forgiveness isn't something you owe anyone, even family. Especially family. Forgiveness is a gift you give yourself, when you're ready, if you're ready. And I wasn't ready yet. Maybe someday. Maybe never. And that was okay. What mattered was that I'd moved on. I'd built a life I loved, surrounded by people who valued me, who treated me with respect and kindness. I turned my pain into art, my anger into fuel, my betrayal into strength. That evening, I hosted another dinner party. This time, it was a smaller group. Just Mrs. Patel, Patricia the lawyer, a few close friends I'd made through my art. We ate on my grandmother's antique table, the one Marcus had tried to steal, and we laughed and told stories and made new memories in the spaces where old ones had been destroyed. At one point, Mrs. Patel raised her glass. "A toast," she said. "To Catherine, who taught us all what it means to rise above." Everyone clinked glasses, and I felt a warmth spread through my chest. Not pride, exactly. Something deeper. Contentment. The knowledge that I'd faced the worst thing I could imagine, and I'd survived it. More than survived. I'd thrived. After dinner, I walked Mrs. Patel home, the way I always did. The night was clear, the stars bright overhead. "Do you think you'll ever forgive him?" she asked. I thought about it. I don't know. Part of me wants to. Part of me thinks holding on to anger just hurts me more than it hurts him. But another part of me thinks that forgiving him would mean pretending it didn't matter, that what he did was okay. And it wasn't. "Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting," she said gently. "It doesn't mean excusing. It just means letting go of the weight. Putting down the bag of rocks you've been carrying." "But what if I'm not carrying them anymore?" I asked. "What if I've already moved on, without forgiving him?" She smiled. "Then maybe you don't need to forgive him. Maybe you've already done something better. You've freed yourself." We reached her house, and she hugged me goodnight. As I walked back to my own home, my dog trotting beside me, I thought about what she'd said. And I realized she was right. I wasn't carrying Marcus's betrayal anymore. I'd set it down somewhere along the way, maybe in the storage unit when I took back my things, maybe in the police station when I showed them the evidence, maybe at the gallery when I transformed my pain into something beautiful. The weight was gone. And in its place was something lighter, brighter. Hope. Joy. A future that belonged entirely to me. I climbed the steps to my porch and paused, looking back at the house. My house. With its blue shutters and wraparound porch and 100 years of memories. It had weathered storms before, literal and metaphorical, and it was still standing. Still beautiful. Still home. And so was I. 2 years after the robbery, I got a call from Vanessa. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. "Catherine," she said, her voice hesitant. "I hope it's okay that I'm calling. I wanted to let you know that Marcus is getting out next month. Early release for good behavior. And he's asking about you. Wondering if you'd be willing to meet with him." My first instinct was to say no. To hang up and block her number and pretend this conversation never happened. But then I thought about everything I'd been through, everything I'd learned. And I realized that meeting with him wouldn't hurt me. Not anymore. Because he no longer had power over me. He was just a man who'd made terrible choices and was trying to live with the consequences. "I'll think about it," I said. "That's more than he deserves," Vanessa said quietly. "Thank you." I spent the next few weeks wrestling with the decision. Part of me wanted closure, wanted to look him in the eye and tell him exactly how much he'd hurt me. But another part of me knew that closure is a myth. That there's no magic conversation that makes everything okay, no perfect sentence that erases the past. In the end, I decided to meet him. Not for him. For me. Because I wanted to prove to myself that I could face him without falling apart, without rage, without fear. I wanted to show myself how far I'd come. We met at a coffee shop in a neutral town, halfway between where he was staying and where I lived. I got there first, ordered a tea, and sat by the window. When he walked in, I barely recognized him. He'd lost weight, his hair was graying at the temples, and there was a weariness in his eyes that made him look decades older than he was. He sat down across from me, and for a long moment, we just looked at each other. "Thanks for coming," he said finally. "I wasn't sure you would." "I wasn't sure I would either," I admitted. He nodded. "I don't expect you to forgive me. I just wanted to say, in person, that I'm sorry. And that I'm trying to be better. I know it doesn't fix anything, but it's all I have." I sipped my tea, considering. "Why did you do it, Marcus?" "Really?" He was quiet for a long time. "Because I was desperate. And angry. And jealous. Grandma loved you in a way she never loved me. She saw something in you that she didn't see in me. And when she left you the house, it felt like she was saying I wasn't good enough. That I'd never be good enough. So I wanted to take it from you. I wanted you to feel as small as I felt. So you punished me for Grandma's choices," I said. "Yes. And I'm sorry. It was wrong. All of it. I set down my tea and leaned forward. You know what the worst part was? Not losing the furniture. Not even the betrayal, though that hurt like hell. The worst part was realizing that you saw me as less than. That you thought I didn't deserve what I had. That my worth was something you could take away. His eyes filled with tears. You're right. And I was wrong. You deserved everything Grandma gave you. You deserved better than what I did. And if I could go back and change it, I would. But I can't. So all I can do is tell you I'm sorry and hope that someday, maybe, you'll be able to think of me without hating me. I looked at him, at this broken man who used to be my brother, and I felt something unexpected. Not forgiveness, exactly. But something close. Understanding. Pity. Maybe even a tiny sliver of compassion. I don't hate you, Marcus, I said. I did, for a while. But hate takes energy, and I decided I'd rather spend that energy building something good. So I let it go. Not for you. For me. He nodded, tears streaming down his face now. You were always the strong one. Even when we were kids. I just didn't see it until it was too late. We talked for another hour. He told me about prison, about the therapy, about his plans to rebuild his life. I told him about the house, about my art, about the community I'd built. It wasn't a reconciliation. We didn't hug goodbye or promise to stay in touch. But it was something. An acknowledgement. A closing of a chapter. As I drove home, I felt lighter. Not because I'd forgiven him, but because I'd faced him. And I'd realized that he was just a person. Flawed. Broken. Human. He wasn't a monster. He was just someone who'd made terrible choices and would have to live with them. And I was someone who'd survived those choices and come out the other side stronger. When I got home, Mrs. Patel was sitting on my porch with 2 cups of tea. How did it go? She asked. It went, I said, sitting beside her. It's done. Good, she said. Now you can really move forward. And I did. Over the next year, my art career took off. I had shows in 3 different states. My graphic design business expanded to the point where I had to hire an assistant. I started teaching workshops on resilience and creativity, helping other people transform their pain into something beautiful. I dated a little, though nothing serious. Mostly, I focused on myself, on my home, on my life. I planted a garden in the backyard, the way my grandmother used to. I learned to play the piano that sat in my living room. I wrote a blog about my journey, and it resonated with thousands of people who'd experienced their own betrayals, their own losses. And every day, I woke up in my grandmother's house, surrounded by the things I'd fought to protect, and I felt grateful. Not for the betrayal, but for what it had taught me. That I was resilient. That I was worthy. That I could build a life on my own terms, no matter what anyone else thought. 3 years after the robbery, I got a text from an unknown number. It's Marcus. I know we haven't talked since that coffee. I just wanted you to know that I'm doing better. I have a job. An apartment. I'm paying back the people I stole from. And I think about you every day. About how strong you are. About how I wish I'd been more like you. I hope you're well. I hope you're happy. You deserve all the good things. M. I read the text. Then I typed a response. I'm glad you're doing better. Take care of yourself. It wasn't much. But it was enough. Because at the end of the day, Marcus's redemption wasn't my responsibility. His healing wasn't my job. I'd spent too much of my life carrying other people's burdens, trying to fix things that weren't mine to fix. Now, I was focused on my own life. My own happiness. My own journey. And it was a good one. 4 years after the robbery, Mrs. Patel passed away in her sleep. It was peaceful, her daughter told me. She'd gone to bed and simply hadn't woken up. I was devastated. She'd been more than a neighbor. She'd been a friend, a mentor, a surrogate grandmother. She'd stood by me when no one else would. At her funeral, I spoke about her kindness, her courage, her loyalty. I talked about how she'd helped me take back my things, how she'd sat with me through the darkest days, how she'd shown me what real family looks like. And as I stood there, Looking out at the crowd of people whose lives she'd touched, I realized something. She'd given me the greatest gift of all. She'd believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. She'd shown me that I was worth fighting for. After the funeral, her daughter approached me. "Mom left you something," she said, handing me an envelope. Inside was a letter, written in Mrs. Patel's shaky handwriting. "Dear Catherine, if you're reading this, I'm gone. Don't be sad. I lived a long, full life, and I'm ready for whatever comes next. I wanted you to know how proud I am of you. When I first met you, you were just a girl moving into her grandmother's house. Now, you're a woman who knows her own strength. You've weathered storms that would have broken most people, and you've come out the other side with grace and courage. Never forget how strong you are. Never forget what you've overcome. And never let anyone make you believe you're not enough. Because you are. You always have been. With love, Mrs. Patel." I cried as I read it. Cried for the woman I'd lost, for the friendship that had changed my life, for the reminder that I'd needed in that moment. And then I folded the letter carefully and placed it in my grandmother's jewelry box, next to the letter I'd written to myself years earlier. Two women, 2 generations apart, both telling me the same thing. You are strong. You are worthy. You are enough. And finally, after all these years, I believed them. Today, 5 years after the robbery, I'm sitting on my porch watching the sunset. My dog is at my feet. My garden is blooming. My house is filled with art and music and laughter. I have a career I love, friends who value me, a life that feels authentic and true. Marcus sends me a card every year on my birthday. I never respond, but I don't throw them away either. They sit in a drawer, a reminder of where I've been and how far I've come. Sometimes people ask me if I regret how things went down, if I wish I'd handled it differently, and I always say the same thing. No. Because that experience, as painful as it was, taught me who I am. It showed me what I'm capable of. It forced me to build a life that was mine, not inherited, not given, but earned. Would I go through it again? Hell no. But would I trade the person I've become because of it? Never. Because here's what I learned. Revenge isn't about destruction. It's not about hurting the people who hurt you. Real revenge is building a life so good, so full, so rich that the people who tried to tear you down become irrelevant. It's proving to yourself that you're bigger than their cruelty, stronger than their betrayal, more resilient than they ever imagined. My brother and his wife showed up with a truck and stripped my home bare. They thought they were taking everything. But they were wrong. Because the things that really mattered, my strength, my dignity, my sense of self, those were never in the truck. Those were always inside me. And no one could take them away. So what would I do if it happened again? I'd do exactly what I did. I'd fight back. I'd reclaim what was mine. I'd refuse to be a victim. And then I'd build a life so beautiful, so full of joy and purpose, that the people who tried to destroy me would be nothing more than a footnote in my story. Because that's the thing about betrayal. It doesn't define you. How you respond to it does. And I chose to rise. What would you do in this situation? Tell me in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this story, if it resonated with you or inspired you or made you think about your own strength, hit that like button and subscribe. Because everyone has a story of survival. And sometimes, hearing someone else's is exactly what you need to remember your own power. Thank you for listening to mine.